it. There are so many of us in Hungerford now. I mean, Jack Williams, who just retired as the time mayor, was at school. My husband, him since knee-high to a table. Margaret, his wife, was in my form at school. Vera Cleverly, another old Hungerfordian. We all went there. Hilda Gore, who I mentioned just now, met her husband Ivor there. I didn't meet my husband there. I met him on the crossing across to do my science in the other school. But there were a lot of marriages formed out of that youth club, and a lot of good work came out of it.
Do the youth clubs still exist now, do you know?
I don't really know. I imagine much more linked to other organisations. I mean, in those days there were guides, and there was ATC and things like that, brownies, all those sort of things.
And there was a cinema when you were?
Yes, there was a cinema, of course, in Regent's Close.
When did that was going strongly when you were?
Oh, that was going strongly, yes. Front row threepence, back row 2 and 6pence. And I really can't think why that ever went, because I think, it was used, but I suppose it was the films that weren't perhaps so much up to date. People had more and more cars.
Television, I think.
Television, yes.
It's coming back again now.
Yes, it is, of course, yes. But of course we won't see that.
And you played games, with the playing fields?
Yes, I played at I was a member of the tennis club, and it doesn't look any different, except that obviously there are new courts. There was only grass courts, 2 grass courts when I was there. I was a junior member there for years, and I was taught to play by the Pratt twins, who both live in the area now. Their father was the butcher here, and they had a brother called Ben, who was a great friend of ours, and we still keep in contact. He doesn't live in the area now. Of course, both Mr and Mrs Pratt have died, and they're the ones who moved into this house that my parents were going to have up here on this top road, on Church Way. But,
and the doctor's surgeries, were they?
Well, the doctor's surgeries were where Gateway is now. That was Dr. Kennedy.
So there were no supermarkets when you
No, nothing like that. No. That was the international stores. International stores, that was. The Co-op and the international stores on the other side of the road. And
offices back.
That was offices, yes, and there was a big house there which the Kennedys lived in, and the surgery was at the back. And that was laundry yard going up the back there. And there was a big laundry up the back there. Then Miss Saunders had her stables up there, and of course then you could just go on up the back way to the station. People took a cut through there. And of course there are lots of works and other works built around there now, aren't there? But Dr. Kennedy was my husband's doctor for a long time, and then Dr. Wallace mine. But of course as a child I had Dr. James, and of course he lived on the opposite side of the water to your house. If you walked across, if you took a straight cut across from the river, there's a big house now which is a square house. I believe it's an antique shop.
It is an antique shop on the corner.
Yes. And
that's where he lived.
He lived there, and he was a lovely character, both Dr. and Mrs. James, lovely. I had my 21st birthday in the church house, and afterwards my parents allowed me to take everybody home, and everybody thought it would be fun to paddle in the river, and it was well after midnight, and my parents were a little worried about the noise level, and although it wasn't raucous, it was just pure, good, clean fun. And I remember Dr. James saying to me in the morning, I know you were 21, Pat, I came to see your cake, and I know you've had a good party. He said, but I didn't really think you were having it in the river. He obviously had heard us, because we came out on that little jut on the other side, and the boys wouldn't let the girls back out, and they had to run across the Warden and back round into the yard to get back into the house. But of course,
what do you think is the biggest change, Pat, coming back? Have you noticed? Really?
Well, size, I suppose. The number of houses. I mean, no longer would a Hungerfordian say, I know everybody who lives here now. I'm quite certain. But there are still. I would think so. Just coming back, in this last year, looking at the number of cars parked along the side of the station, I imagine quite a few people do commute. And also, I have been down there at the time when the trains come in, and a lot of people are picked up. So, they don't just leave their cars there, obviously. So I would think a lot of people commute these days. I mean, there were always people commuting, but I'm quite certain more now. And of course, the antique shop has made Hungerford well known.
Well, it's a popular tourist area, isn't it?
Yes,
on
it
Sunday.
is. Yes.
Sunday, I suppose, was quite quiet when you were.
Oh, absolutely quiet. And I also remember another thing on a Sunday. My father was very keen on his garden. It was an enormous garden. And sometimes he would say, just pop across to Stillman's, or I think it was Stillman's, and then it became Triggs, which is what is now Roxton's. That was a sweet shop. And he'd give me a shilling, well that would buy 6 bars of chocolate. you know, mum would choose and I would choose. I was an only one. And, you know, those little things are big memories. You can remember that. And going back to school, I can always remember the very first day it rained and I had to walk to school, because we had a car, but you didn't get your car out to take children to school in those days. You know, you actually walked.
Or cycled, I suppose.
That's right, yes, but I walked up from Bridge Street, obviously, with my mother. And I can remember I had it's just a vague memory, but I had a new Mac and some gum boots. And she told me not to run, and I did. And that's a very steep hill going up, because it goes up through Fairfields, but there was nothing on either side in those days. It was allotments where Fairfields is. And it was just called School Alley. And I can also remember tumbling down there and really grazing my knees. But I haven't got a lot of memories of school there, except two teachers called Miss Higgins, who were wonderful teachers. And I also did have smallpox when I was at school. There was
very unusual.
It was. There was an outbreak of chickenpox here, which was very, very strong, and I didn't get it. And there was a girl called Mary Wilmot, whose father was a builder, lived just down the high street. She didn't either. And then we both had this tremendous cases, which the doctors were convinced was a touch on smallpox rather than chickenpox, because I was off school for 3 months, and I was literally bound from head to toe. I had it all over my face, all in my hair, but I'm lucky I've got hardly any. I've got 1 or 2 on my legs and 1 or 2 just around my waistband, but nothing. I think the odd one here.
I suppose you were isolated.
Yes, completely. But after so long, I can't remember how many weeks, you know, I just kept shut up in the bedroom, literally. I was brought work from school, and the Miss Higginses, when they could, visited Miss Margaret in particular. And then there was a Miss Willis there, whose father was a plumber in Hungerford. And she married, and she became Mrs. Eatwell, a Mrs. Eatwell. So, well, that was an Eatwell family, another Hungerford family. And those are the vague things I remember about school. I've got a couple of books in the bookcase that I won for nature study. So obviously we were encouraged to do nature walks, but of course, you know, I went off to the high school when I was 11, so, you know, my more solid memories of school are linked with my older life, but I think you do so much more.
If you didn't go on to school in Newbury, where would you go in Hungerford?
Well, you would have just stayed here until you were 14 and then left school. Yes.
You said you